Let's begin the next session. And from the previous sessions, now we can say that we understand a little bit about the oneM2M. What is oneM2M and what is oneM2M platform and what is the oneM2M APIs that we are going to practice on 2 days, like today and tomorrow. In this session, we will implement a really small or simple application using the APIs that we learned so far. And the title of the session is the Application Developer Guide. So the motivation. So we've been learning the oneM2M different APIs, and to have a better understanding on the APIs, we should implement a simple service. Then we can expect more usages by ourselves. And this one is referring the oneM2M TR25, which is the oneM2M developer guide, and I have simplified the setting or the system configuration a bit more to just focus on the oneM2M API explanation. So there's a simple use case from the tier 25, which is basically the smart home service. And I'm going to explain the procedures and the call flows that we are going to implement. And then finally the implementation. And we are not going to have a source code level implementation, but we will implement the service with the Postman and the oneM2M platform. So here's the use case. In the TR25, there are two different CSCs, the gateway platform and the server platform. But just to focus on the API use cases, there is only one CSC. And again, this is a really simple smart home service. So let's assume that this is the house and there's a home gateway and there are two light bulbs and the user application, for example, on the smartphone. And the devices and the user application, those are connected to the platform. And in other words, we say that they are registered to the oneM2M platform. And the user application can get the sensor measurement from the platform, which was generated from the device, and of course it can send the actuation messages to the device, like the turn on and off of the lamp. So this is the list of the APIs that we're going to try in this session: registration and discovery, and resource creation, especially some resources representing the data. And we are going to use the group feature, including the group fan out, and then the subscription and notification. So basically, we are covering the most frequently used APIs of the oneM2M in this simple scenario. So the procedures and call flows, and procedures in one slide summary. So there will be the registration of the devices and the user application to the platform, and then the initial resource creation to share the data. Especially the simplest API for us to do is the content and content instance resource APIs, and we create those resources. And to get the event notification, we need to create the subscription resource to the interested resources. And we will do the discovery, and with the discovery we're going to create a group, because we can get the sensor measuring individually to different resources, or we can of course send the command to the single actuation device, but we can do the batch operation over the group. So we create a group. So that will be the last scenario that we are going to implement. So here's the call flow for the registration, and from the other diagram we saw the icons, and in this picture they are the actors, and verb 1 and 2 they are the application entity, and there's the gateway platform and another application entity, which is basically oneM2M application, that is user application. They are kind of registering to the platform, and in the API terms, that is the AE resource creation request. And we are going to create the initial resources, including container and some content instances as the initial sensor reading. And also we create the subscription to get the commands in real time. For example, if the verb is creating the subscription to the container, that verb can receive the actuation messages which are generated by the user application. It will send the instance creation, and it will be sent over the notification from the CSA to the verb 1 or verb 2 due to that subscription setting. We will be describing that procedure again. And the user application, in this case, it will send the discovery request to the platform because the verb 1 and 2 and their corresponding resources are already created and supported by the CSC. So we always send the request to the CSC, not the kind of application entities directly. So we get the discovery results, and from the list we will create a group to be used as the kind of fan-out procedure later. So this is the resource table that we have been created as an abstract version. So in the CSC base, we create 3 different AE resources to represent verb 1 and 2, and then the user application. And each verb, light verb, has the containers for the status reporting and actuation from the user application. So there are actually 2 different containers, and the user application creates the group to send the kind of final request to individual verbs by the CSE. So for the initial sensor reading to be shown on the user application screen, for example, so it will send the final retrieve request targeting the group resource, which has the lightbulb 1 and 2 status container resource. So the group final request is targeting the CSC because we have created a group, and the final point is the kind of sub resource of the group, and of course even including the A resource and the container resources of those different light bulbs, they are all stored supported by this CSC. So there's no direct interaction between the user application to the light bulbs to get the latest sensor reading. And to switch on and off of the light bulb individually, user application creates the content instance because that is the kind of assumption. And we already created the subscription of a lightbulb 1 and of course lightbulb 2's command container, for example. Then the newly created content instance is delivered in the notification request from the CSC to the lightbulb because they have created the subscription to get the newly created content instance event, and we will try it soon. And with the group fan-out, we can create the content instances, which is basically the command. And once we send the one request to create a content instance over the group fan-out, then resources will be created in this case two times for bulb 1 and bulb 2, and CSC, of course, it creates the resources, and since they are subscribing to those events, CSC is sending two notifications, one for bulb 1 and the other one for bulb 2. So those are the scenarios that we are going to implement with the postman and CSC, in our case Mobius. So let's start from the AE registration. So we are registering the light bulb 1, 2, and then the user application. And on the left hand side, there's the Mobius running on, and this is the postman to do some API call. So firstly, we are going to create the light bulb 1 and 2, and then the user app, and the bulb 1 is created by A1, for example. So it has been created, and say A2 is creating the light bulb 2 resource right under the CSE base. In our case, the name is the Mobius, and CSE3, CA3, the third application entity, it will create user app as the resource name of the AE. And then the next step is we are creating two different containers for individual light bulb 1 and 2. One is the status for the sensor reading, and the other one is the control. Under the light bulb 1 and 2, there are AE resources. So let's do that. So container creation, and firstly A1 is creating the control and status container right under the bulb 1. So we target bulb 1. So control and status for bulb 1, and A2 is creating those resources under bulb 2 status and control. So we have created the rooms for the content instances. One is the sensor reading from the sensor itself, and the other one is the actuation messages from the user application, finally delivered to the light bulb 1 and 2. And then we put the initial kind of sensor reading for the status container of bulb 1 and 2. And let's say that they are kind of turned on, so the payload that we chose is the string on. So we need the content instance creation for the bulb 1 status. The CA1 is creating the instance, and then the A2 is creating the same one, or you can choose to do light bulb 2. Maybe you can say that is turned off. So that's the setup that we have done so far, and let's create this subscription, and the notification will be sent to the light bulbs bulb 1 and 2, but just for the simplicity, for the demonstration, we will choose the same notification address that you can kind of print out the notification that we receive on the console. So anyways, this is the subscription resource representation that we're going to use. And the notification event type 3 is the child resource creation, because we are going to create a new content instance, which is basically the new command under the control container resources. So we are creating the subscription for Lightbulb 1 and 2's control container. So subscription, so bulb 1, and don't mind the kind of subscription resource name, and event type equals 3. Again, this is child resource creation event, and we want to get the notification to the localhost 7000 port. And actually this is the kind of simple HTTP echo server that I can kind of print out the notification message on the console. So the notification endpoint is running like that. So C1 is creating the subscription, and C2 is creating the same subscription but for its own bulb. So everything is ready, and maybe it's time for us to do some discovery to see whether we successfully created the resources. And for example, let's start from the bulb 1 and see what are the resources under bulb 1. So bulb 1 has the status and the control, the container, and we have created the subscription for the control. So whenever we create a new actuation message as a new content instance right under the control container, due to the subscription that we create, we will get the notification, and the notification will be sent to the local echo server, which has the port number like 7000. That was the setup we did, and this is the content instance we have created as an initial sensor reading as an assumption. And for the user application, yeah, we have not done anything for the user app. And yeah, the discovery. So we should do the discovery for the status containers, which are the child container of Lightbulb 1 and 2. So we are sending the request, having looking for the container resource type equals 3. That is the container resource type, and we are looking for the resource named status. So let's do the discovery. So CB as a variable in Postman, this is representing the Mobius, and we are sending the discovery, which is filter usage equals 1. That means filter is used for the discovery, and we're looking for type 3, and we're looking for the resource name as status. So we have successfully discovered those two status container, and we are going to use this result to create a group. And the group creation. So we are going to, as we designed the resource tree before, user app is going to use that group resource. So we simply create the new group resource right under the user app, which is the AE resource. So that is being kind of requested by CAE3, and the resource type 9 is the group resource. Yeah, verb 1 and 2 and their status group, and we name it as status group. So we create it, and going back to the retriever, so under the user application, now we have the status group resource. And of course we can also see how it looks like this. So we already created a group resource having two status container, and we can do the same thing also for the control. Just simply we can replace the sub-container name because we already created the control container on the verb 1 and 2. Control, control, and we should pick the other name for this group. So let's say that this is control group. We have successfully created the new group resource named control group, having the control of the verb 1 and control of verb 2. And let's use the kind of fan out mechanism. So we can send the fan out request to the fan out virtual resource of the group resources that we have created. So going back to the get request, we can send the request targeting the fan out point FOPT in short by the oneM2M specification. And when you do that, we have aggregated responses. One is from the verb 1 status. Since we have created a group of status container, so there is the container representation for the first one and the second one, like this. So the question is, how do we get the latest data or sensor reading of the two verb status containers? And since we are trying the group creation, we can create the other group, for example like this. But as we learned from the previous session, and to get the latest content instance, which is basically the latest sensor reading from the light bulb, we can have a group having the members like the latest. LA is short for latest by the oneM2M specification. So let's say that that is the status group 1. And we know that we have created at least one content instance for individual status container here and there. So when you go back to the final point script, so we should try the status group 1 and its final point. So in this case, we get the response back from two resources. One is the status latest of the bug 1, and now we get the content instance resource, not the container resource. And for the first one, we created the initial status like on, and for the second one, we have created the status as off. So this is one of the way of doing that to get the latest data of the containers. So it's time for us to send the actuation message targeting, in this case, firstly to a single light bulb. And we send the content instance creation to, for example, the bulb 1. And let's see whether we can successfully get the notification because we already created the subscription for the control message. So let's check the subscription before we kind of fire out the content instance creation. So the verb1 has the control container. Sorry. And we can send the request to check the subscription like this. Of course, there is the subscription, so it's okay to send the content instance creation targeting verb1 in this case. So content instance, and we send the request to verb1, and this is not a sensor reading, but this is the actuation. So we shall target the container named control of verb1, and we send the request. Like now it is gonna turn off because that's what we meant. And in the notification, we just got this notification, and due to the mySub1 under verb1 control, there was an event which was the new content instance creation, and the event type was set like notification event type 3. This is the setting that we put into the subscription before in the mySub1. So this is the event information for this notification representation REP, and REP contains the newly created content instance resource object in JSON in this case. Then it's time for us to kind of actuate multiple devices at once with the content instance creation targeting the group fan out. And let's see whether we get two notifications for one request. So what we need to do is to the control group, which has two control containers, we target that, of course, to the fan out point. This is the typo. There should be the FOPT in the end like this. And since those are turned off, then let's turn them on altogether. And just to check the current status, let's check the status user app. And there's the status group 1 having two latest virtual resources as we checked out, and FOPT. Then we can get two response back in with a single request. So it's on and off. So let's send the group fan out. Here we go. So now we are sending the request to the group fan out. Group resources in the user app control group, and we are not sending the content instance creation to the group resource, but is virtual child resource named FOPT, representing a fan out point. So we can turn them off. So now we can see that the verb1 got the notification, verb1 itself got the notification having the new command of con is the content of the content instance, and also verb2 into the control container, it got the same request payload like the turn it off. So this is the last scenario for this session, and this was the oneM2M application developer guide, which is the simplified version of oneM2M TR25. And I hope you got the better understanding from this service implementation. Thank you.